podcast. I am Ashley, marketing at Titan Haptics. I'm joined by my Haptics Club crew. We've got Eric from Haptics, also Razor, which is super awesome. Update there. He's rocking his shirt right now, which is epic. Sarah as well. We've also got Heiss and Irina from Sense Glove, Community I mentioned already. He's working on something special right now, and he's going to have a major personal update, so it's going to be really cool. But let's jump right in here. The Haptics Club team is all about people that are passionate about haptics. Our goal is to raise awareness of all the amazing people and technologies that are happening in the space. And our goal is to foster some really interesting discussions around the topic. And there's so many different topics we can cover. We're, of course, happy for another episode. This is another season of amazing guests, and we're just really excited to, for all our listeners, all the amazing feedback you guys continue to give us. Speaking of that right now, we've got Samantha here. Samantha's from, she's technology and engineering designer at Korg in Berlin. We've also got Luca Turchet, the associate professor at the University of Trento, Department of Information Engineering and Computer Science. Oof, we've got so much cool stuff to talk about here on the musical side of things. Before we do, let's talk about how this is going to work. If you're a regular here, you know, but let's drop it. We've got 5-minute quick intro. We've got 15 minutes area of expertise, 10 minutes on the future of haptics, which is my favorite area, of course. And we'll cover everything from opportunities that are like incoming, future, and of course, challenges, which are really important to discuss as well. Around the 30-minute mark, of course, we turn off the recording, and anyone who's listening is going to miss out on all the juicy questions that get asked during that period of time. So you'll be missing out. And of course, you can join us next time. Go to the hapticsclub.com. That's our website. Haptics Club on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. We're everywhere. You can RSVP to our next events. But of course, let's dive right in because this is the fun part. Are you ready to jam, Eric? Let's do it.
I'm always ready to jam. Thanks, Ashley. So let's get the thing started. So ladies first, as Italian gentleman here. So Samantha, if you can share a couple of words about yourself, your background, and your current activity in the fantastic world of music and haptics.
Sure. So I actually have a background in architecture. I studied architecture in Vancouver, and I also studied, research in architectural research, I guess you could say, in Stuttgart in Germany. And so my focus was actually more on like things like digital fabrication and fabrication in general. So I did a lot of construction. And then during my master's, I did a master thesis with a few other people where I was at the Max Planck Institute in Stuttgart in the haptics group. And we were investigating different ways that you could assist people when they're constructing something, fabricating something, but kind of moving away from this idea that it had to always be like augmented with vision, but actually like how could haptics come into play to kind of improve people's accuracy, or it was a bunch of different explorations on how haptics could work. And then after that, I've always really enjoyed musical instruments. I'm not really a musician myself. I mean, I've dabbled, and an opportunity came up to work with Korg Berlin, which is a subsidiary of Korg, and Korg is based in Japan and has been around for quite a while, and they do all different types of instruments, electronic musical instruments. And yeah, I joined them as a designer, as someone who was fabricating, and they were also interested that I had a little bit of a background in haptics, because of course they're always trying to push the way that we interact or shape sound. And this is like a big area that, I mean, you can explore so much hasn't been explored with haptics and instruments. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Samantha. Wonderful history. I didn't know that you were an architect. That's amazing. Luca, up to you. A few words about your career in haptics and music.
Yeah. My name is Luca Turchet. Actually, this is the spelling. And yes, I'm an associate professor at the Department of Information Engineering and Computer Science, University of Trento, Italy. Basically, my research deals with several kinds of fields. The most prominent ones are definitely music technology, human-computer interaction, and multi-sensory interactive systems. So I try to combine multiple sensory modalities at once to provide different kinds of feedback to the user. The applications that I deal mostly with are virtual reality. So for instance, I use haptics for increasing the sense of presence, the sense of realism of the interaction of the user within a virtual environment. And for that, for instance, I created some wearables such as haptic shoes, so shoes that have some motors inside that transform the footfall of a person on a laboratory, so to speak, into, for instance, sensation of walking over snow or walking over gravel. At the same time, the user also listens to his or her footstep sounds and sees in the virtual environment a certain landscape. And this concerns for the topics for non-musical systems and non-musical interactions. But I would say that my big passion is music, and I tried to bring haptics also into this realm that today is called, as a, so to speak, a name as a research field in its own right, that is a musical haptics. And for instance, I dealt with different kinds of wearables, again, for musicians or for audience members that I will probably talk to you about later on. The last bit that I would like to tell about myself is that I also deal with artificial intelligence in musical context, for instance, for creating intelligent musical instruments or intelligent musical environments. So this is, in a nutshell, what I do at the academic level. I would like just to take my last minute to tell you that I also have an industrial background. I have co-founded a company called Elk, which is based in Sweden, which deals with mostly with embedded systems for audio, in particular for ultra low latency audio processing, as well as it deals with the so-called networked music performance systems, which are systems that enable geographically displaced musicians to play together remotely.
That's awesome. So I feel we have the best team ever here to discuss these things, and I'm super happy. Someone that deals with experiences not building instruments, and someone who builds instruments, and we are ready to go. So we had some chat around that, and this, you know, I'm a musician myself. You don't see my guitars because they're in the other room, but I'm a musician myself, and I did spend like 10 years playing live around Italy and Europe sometimes, and I'm a guitarist. And one of the things that always struck me is how much different is the experience of playing in front of my amplifier of a guitar than destroying all these basses to me, to my stomach, compared to I listen to the music in my headphones, right? So this is it's just much less engaging. And there is, of course, this new wave of haptics devices like the Voyager, like maybe the first Lofeld, that wanted to bring back this kind of physicality of this interaction with the music. So what's your take on that? I mean, when we have another channel to use there, just doing the basses, it's one way. What do you think we can do, or what's your take on this technology, and what do you think we can do a bit more during this playback experience? Ladies first, so Samantha, you.
I start. Yeah, I mean, I totally know what you're getting at there, because of course, with electronic musical instruments, like normally you're not getting any feedback. It's just auditory. You've lost vibration. I know that, you know, the industry is always kind of chasing after this acoustic kind of feeling, but it's definitely a tricky one. It's a tricky one because I can remember, like you mentioned, Lofeld. And I remember they did a module that went into, I guess it was, you can call it like a synthesizer controller for teenage engineering. And like the funny thing is that I think the community was quite interested in it. Like the people who did it, they were able to try it. I mean, when they had it and they had this vibration feedback to the musics they were playing, and then they could kind of feel this vibration through the frequencies and like the different hertz, the different note levels, and get really the bass. I mean, the feedback that I'd heard was that people loved it, and I've tried it out firsthand, and it's very interesting. And then as soon as you take it out, like people say it's lost its life, and it was really hard for them to kind of work with this without it, I guess you could say. But at the same time, it's something that was quite niche, and that not a lot of people adapted it, and not a lot of people wanted this module in. They wanted to like pick it up off the shelf and put it in. They wanted different things for their modules. So, I mean, having this kind of like vibration feedback on the instrument, I don't know how much it's continuing, and I don't know how much they're changing it. And for me, like the way that we can kind of improve haptics for the instrument has a lot more to do with the way that the controls actually are, and the kind of feedback you're getting from the controls and the gestures and things like that. So that's what I have to say about that.
So basically, it's more about the semantic of the interaction instead of the pure feeling of the sound that comes from it. Let's say the guitar is not about the guitar that vibrates, that is one thing, but it's more about, can I tune my interactions with the digital instrument to get the changing feedback that you can't get with the digital one, more like an analogic interaction, plus all the freedom that you have in design for with a digital system, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I see that through the types of instruments that are being put out by large companies and individuals, that they're more kind of chasing this. There is some force feedback being put in to kind of change this interaction. But yeah, in terms of like vibration and kind of emphasizing vibration in the actual body of the instrument, I don't see this so often. And yeah, I wasn't 100% sure if they deemed it quite a huge success for like a product like Teenage Engineering.
Yeah, great. So Luca, let's hear your take on this. And the first question is this audio to haptics and or complementation, this playback music.
So first, I agree with Samantha. I totally agree with her. I would like to provide a different perspective, however, among the same lines. The first thing to say probably is that digital musical instruments indeed lose their haptic counterpart, right? Compared to the acoustic instruments, right? So when you have a wonderful digital musical instrument, you don't have all the richness, so to speak, of the guitar, of bending the guitar, or the vibrations on your body, and so on. And from a human-computer interaction perspective, we have to be aware of this very much, because research says, on the one hand, that beginners typically when learning a musical instrument, rely mostly, on average, on the visual aspects, but experts tend to rely a lot less on visual aspects and a lot more on haptic aspects. And this is very important when we consider designing a product, for instance, for a certain category of users, okay? The issue is that the digital musical instruments are really, really widespread, are really different, heterogeneous. So we are ranging from keyboard style musical instruments to digital musical instruments that are embodied, so that the person moves, or for instance, you have the musical instruments that are called air instruments, right? And there you don't have any, typically you don't have any haptic sensations. Now there are, of course, some exceptions to it, and I have in mind musical instruments that use ultrasonic waves to provide, for instance, haptic feedback in the air, right? For musical interactions. But definitely, I would like to note that there is an issue in the musical instruments industry, because haptic feedback for musicians is really, really important. Okay. Second thing, I strongly believe that there are somehow there is an untapped power for haptics, a set of unexplored possibilities to enhance the musical experience, not only for the musician, but also for the audiences. On the one hand, there is the problem, or better, the idea of recreating a sense of realism like the one that you were suggesting before, Eric. So you have your basically your headphones, and you would like probably to feel the impact on your body of the vibrations of your amplifier while you play, correct? But on the other hand, there is really a lot of space for creativity, for designing a new interaction, something that is not new, that is not real, not present in reality, right? So thanks to haptics technology, we can somehow surprise the user, create something that is really radically new, with the goal of course, of enhancing the musical experience of a musician or a listener.
That's great. I mean, brings us directly in our topic. As to sum up, is the pure vibrational aspect is good. It does make sense. However, that's not let's say, you are opening a new channel of communication fundamentally, and ideally is. We know a lot of things about the visual and sound, right? Because video games and now cinemas explained us everything about that. There is 40 years of research or experiences built. We don't know enough on sound and haptics, and how can we use them together in a convergent and divergent way to create engaging experience for the user. And I am totally super interested to see where we are going from here. So that's amazing. Maybe let's talk about some more practical project that both of you, Samantha, and you, Luca, would like to share more around this topic. Let's again, ladies first. Samantha, do you have some prototypes that you're meddling with, or it can share, of course, or some specific experiences that were impactful in this digital musical instrument with haptics that you would like to share, or share some learning on that?
Learning on that. Yeah. Well, I actually can't share anything that I'm working on right now. We're not allowed because, I mean, it's not really public, but of course there is something that has a sound, and we are working on controls to fit that sound. But yeah, I mean, like beyond that, I don't have like too many experiences with, like if I can't talk about that, then I don't have a lot of like, we didn't do a lot of, experimental prototyping with haptics. It's just more things that I have seen other artists do or other creators do that I'm kind of learning from all the time. And yeah,
what's
like
the three more impactful, the three more impactful things?
More impactful things?
Yeah, other people do. Okay,
well, something that I absolutely loved and that I've talked about with people in my office quite a bit is it's called, what is it called? It's Turchet, I think is how they're pronouncing it. And it basically is this kind of pad. I believe it has 4 axes. And what it is like, you can imagine you have a keyboard or something like that. And on the keyboard, like maybe there's some touch sensitivity for velocity. Maybe it has some of these elements so that when you like strike the note, you could have like loudness or change some element of the sound. But what it is, it's actually like a pad that you'd kind of put next to it. Place your hand on it. I don't know if you can't see my hand. Place your hand on it. And like while you're playing notes, you can shape the sound. And you kind of use like really subtle movements back and forth. And people can look this up to kind of see how it works. And this for me was really amazing because it doesn't matter what you're plugging that into or what kind of sound, like the sound source, you were really able to shape it, I guess, in quite a dynamic way, what you're kind of what you're trying to achieve with the music. And it really moves away from, just turning a knob or, a slider or something like that. It was much more engaging and active because often when you're like turning a knob or a slider, you're like playing and then you're kind of like fiddling with it. They're often very small. So it's like if you're trying to do like a very fine movement, this is not something that's quite easy. So this was something that I found very interesting. Another thing that I'm loving in terms of like haptics and gesture and music would be, and I think Luca was already talking about this, just wearable haptics. So, or wearable controllers that are being used to control sound. So there's a very interesting company in Berlin that I believe had like a successful startup where, you know, these are things that are being worn on your body, and they've been targeting this towards dancers. So no matter how the dancer moves, this is being linked with, I don't know, Ableton or something like that, whatever you want to use as your sound source, and they're able to create music from this. So like this has also been something very interesting I've seen within the community. And then beyond that, I've gone to events like Super Booth, which is basically, you know, where like this happens in Berlin, where, you know, you have all these different people who like from big companies to like individuals who are showcasing instruments. And there you can see like a lot of fascinating things. But one thing I did see when I was there, or at least it was talked about, were, you know, just like small little things that people have implemented into instruments. So I've seen like a Eurorack module that had like a knob, and a Eurorack is just like, you know, like a panel about yay big, and you have a lot of plugs, like different, you know, connect cables. So maybe people have seen these before. And it had this like haptic feedback knob, which I thought was quite fun. So basically you could change, it was motorized. So the way that you interacted with the sound was a bit different. Like sometimes you had some like, I guess kind of like an elastic pull. You know, it was just like, I believe the person was just trying to find some way. I'm realizing this is hard to talk about with like words just to describe what this was doing. But yeah, I mean, they were just trying to push the boundaries of how people were interacting with sound. And, you know, again, people were absolutely loving this. And I actually have tons of more examples, but maybe I'll stop talking. These are the three things that I was seeing that I quite liked.
I love how always is hard for people to verbalize touch. And we know that this is one of the reasons by which we start the podcast. It's also for allowing people to create a common vocabulary by step, just talking about things and being able to listen to them. So I love that this challenge has been verbalized for once, let's say. Thanks. And let's go back to you, Luca. What are you working on right now that you would like to share, or a key project that you did, that some key insights that you would like to share on this music and haptics correlation?
Yeah, luckily I'm an academic, so I do the opposite. So I have to share what I do. I have worked and I keep working on the two lines of haptics and music research. The first is how to make musicians communicate together via the sense of haptics. And this is very useful for all situations in which a visual communication is not possible. And the classic example is the communication between visually impaired musicians, or between visually impaired musicians and visual bodied, I mean, not visually impaired musicians. And this is very important also for inclusive reasons. No? We really wanted to go towards a more inclusive society, and it is also important to create some technologies that address a gap that is currently unfilled by technology or by the market. So I focused, but I have not been definitely the first one. I focused on this class of users, and I work with visually impaired musicians, and I created some systems that enable them to synchronize. So a typical problem that arose from a co-design set of workshops with this orchestra of blind musicians in London when I was living there was exactly that they had issues in coordinating. It's an orchestra of only blind musicians, okay? And they wanted to change tempo, they want to have notifications when to start or when to stop, or when to increase the volume of the instruments and so on. And therefore, we created some wearables that precisely provided this kind of information in terms of vibration. And we proved that actually they worked. We co-designed with them the vibrations, the kind of vibration that they wanted. We also co-designed a controller that allowed to stream wirelessly the messages among the musicians, and then we did some tests. And that was really interesting to see that after all, after just a few sessions, musicians learned this new language, because it was a new vocabulary that they had to learn, and they used it properly with a relatively high successful percentage of implementing the vibration that was supposed to what the vibration was supposed to mean. The second application of this technology was instead for non-visually impaired musicians. And a typical example of why haptic feedback is really needed for enhancing the communication of between musicians is for the case of electronic musicians. Why? Because electronic musicians, I mean, I'm an electronic musician myself, you give them a tool and they stay there for hours without looking at each other. This is a fact, okay? So this was a problem because maybe you can stay hours and say to the other musician, hey, look at me, let's change tempo, or let's start a new session, or something like some other kind of information, right? And we try to encode this useful information that are typically missed because a visual communication is essentially rare or even absent sometimes. And we found out again that the haptic communication was a great substitute for visual communication, was very useful to exchange indeed the directions, such as start playing, stop playing, increase the beat, and so on. Third, and then I stop, really there is an aspect that really fascinates me in this domain of musical haptics. That is how to enhance the experience of listening or listeners through a new sensory channel, right? Through the haptic, through the sense of touch. So something that is not there, however, when we listen only music in a live concert. But we would like to listen to some music and feel something else. And this is not only a problem that is in the domain of design and development. It's really an artistic problem. So we need to be able to compose artistically, compose for haptics, or better, for musical haptics, because it would be an haptic sensation that has to somehow create a consonance or a dissonance with the auditory signals that we perceive. And to do so, there is a paradigm that I tried to be a pioneer, so to speak. That is the paradigm of the Internet of Musical Things, that relates to the extension of the domain of Internet of Things to the musical domain. And therefore, like in the Internet of Things, there is the smart fridge, the smart cars, and so on. In the Internet of Musical Things, we have the smart musical instruments, or the smart haptic wearables, okay? What is the trick? That we would like to create intelligent musical instruments that are also connected to the internet or to a wireless link in a situated environment, that are so intelligent that they understand what the musicians are actually playing, such as, for instance, the emotions of the musician, or the beat per minute, or other informations related to patterns, rhythms, chords, and so on. And through the wireless link that I was talking about before, send these messages, this information to the audience that is wearing these haptic wearables, and the haptic wearables will transform this information into haptic signals. Okay, and the challenge here is first of all to extract the information in real time on an embedded system that is inside the instrument. Second, how to send in ultra low latency the message to the wearables, to the distributed audience. And third, again, how to compose haptic signals for the audience while they listen.
You have 25 years of research there.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, it's super. It's definitely super interesting. It's on 30. I have 50 other questions that I want to share, but let's stay a bit off topic. Maybe we'll jump on it later on. Maybe just one. I would like to have your take. I mean, you mentioned that for visually impaired, understanding a new semantic through haptics was easy, and I'm not surprised with that because they are much more plastic on the sense of touch than people who are not visually impaired. At least this is my experience. You didn't mention how fast it was for people who actually are not visually impaired to pick up a new haptic semantic, because from my experience, that's super hard. Can you comment on that?
Yes. Now I have the paper that I wrote myself, and I don't recall the exact percentages, but from what I recall, okay, no, the percentages are very high for some of the semantics and not so high for some others. So, for instance, for some simple vibrations to remember, like start playing and stop playing, that were associated to, I read from the paper what I did, continuous vibration of strong intensity lasting 2 seconds. This was very, very understandable, and they reacted with a percentage of 98.21. Okay, so it was almost perfect. But the lowest percentages were for other kinds of information, like pay attention to the conductor, that was rendered as a series of rapid intermittent pulses of constant and medium intensity in the span of 3 seconds. Okay, that was around 69.64%. So, okay, there is also to say that they were musicians, they wanted really to learn these things, but they also had really only a couple of sessions, so it was not a longitudinal study. But it is hard, and this I agree with you, Eric, but I also think that it depends on us as designers. So let's have our mea culpa, in the sense that the user is always right, okay? There are, of course, tasks that are easier and tasks that are more difficult, and there is a wide range of people with different sensitivity to haptic sensations, and age, for instance, is one element that can cause discrepancies in variabilities in results and so on. But these kind of things somehow we can control. We can't have control too much on these things, or at least we should, I think, not only provide tutorials or means for the user to learn, but also means to customize their own experience. So this is my take on this problem.
Thank you. You came prepared. That's good.
Okay.
No, I know this is a really hard question, and sometimes people with haptics, they don't want to hear this question. And when they are saying, we should do that and that, yes, okay, it's fine. But did you think about the fact that people actually do get that? And I do get the fact that it's a designer's problem. It's also, I'm quite convinced that there are many applications where this is not possible, and there are some applications when this makes sense. For example, music is one that makes sense. Maybe driving a car is the one that makes sense. Many other learning a new semantic for haptics is why. I mean, Google tried with the navigation, right? People just didn't get it, and right now it doesn't. Nobody relies on haptics on turn left and right because it just doesn't work on your hands, and that's fine. It's okay. It's a learning process. But said so, I gave back the mic to Ashley. I talked too much. And Ashley, to you, to the funniest part, future of haptics.
Sweet. Yeah, this is awesome. So many great insights so far. Thanks so much to both of you. But the future, this is the most exciting part because I think a lot of people are even just kind of getting up to speed of what the current technologies are. They're seeing things like haptic vests being used at concerts, so you can experience music in a different way. But in terms of where you both see the future of whether it's musical instruments or it could be like a live experiences, where do you think your area is going to, what it's going to look like in say 5 to 10 years? What's the vision you hope it will become? Let's start with Samantha.
Sure. From my own personal interest, what I have been, I guess, most impacted by, and I would like to see this continue and for so many amazing things to happen in this area, and this has already kind of been discussed, it's just like how haptics can improve the lives of people, like certain communities of people. So you're talking about people with vision impairment or the deaf-blind community. I just think that there's so many beautiful opportunities to open certain sectors of work or entertainment where that door was normally closed for people in that community. And I think that there's a huge future and more people developing with these people in mind. So that's one thing. In terms of musical instruments, I'll echo a little bit of what I said before, which is I think that, I just want to see like us move away from, always like it's a keyboard that we're using to control like a digital sound or an analog instrument, or, again, we've separated the source of the sound and the action to like a control that's totally somewhere else. I want to see like more fusion with like our bodies. I want to see like more weird instruments kind of come out with like, different types of gesture. And I think that, people, like I would say that the community that's using electronic musical instruments, I mean, they're pretty quick to adapt to different things. They're very interested in kind of like these new wacky ideas that you can sometimes see come out from like smaller companies to kind of try them out. Like firsthand, I've seen lots of people use, these kind of creative like musical machines that integrate like haptic interactions. And, there's a huge interest for this. So I wouldn't say that I would count on like really large companies, like even the one that I'm working for, to kind of push this, because, it's kind of more of an unseen future. And you often have like things like, this is my idea, here's my product plan, like this is what I'm going to put out. They can't really see it. They can't see how this could be adapted. But yeah, I'm putting a lot of faith in like these kind of like smaller startups and individuals who are really passionate about haptics and kind of changing what electronic music, or how you can express or create music with electronic musical instruments. And I think that it's one type of instrument that has some rules, but like no rules at the same time. And I think that, you're kind of free with this kind of thinking. And yeah.
I love that. How do you think it's going to change music, or do you think it'll change music because of how you can engage in a different form?
I mean, I guess it kind of goes into Luca's territory that it's probably going to change, like, well, first of all, it can change how you enjoy music and how you enjoy sitting around and playing music. Absolutely. But I think even from like a performance standpoint, I'm sure lots of people have this sentiment where, they see someone up on stage and they've got like a beat pad and, they're just like pressing beats or like turning a knob. And this kind of, you're not really taken with watching this. Not all the time, some people are, but it's not very expressive where, when you have other instruments and you're kind of seeing the movement of people to kind of control the sound, I don't know, it's more visceral, like you're kind of taking it on. And I think that this will change, your own way of playing it, and like maybe the type of music. I'm not sure how that would change. It's hard for me to imagine, but definitely the performance element would be like a huge thing there. And I think that, that's something that, like at Korg, we're always talking, or we're trying to talk more to people that are musicians to kind of see like, how would you like to perform? Like, what would be interesting for you? Or like, what kind of gets your creative, like like your creativity kind of flowing, and how would you want to interact with the audience a bit differently? How would you want them to see you play a bit differently? So these are like ongoing conversations, and hopefully like, something can come of that at some point.
Awesome. I love that so much. Yeah, it's so true about like the press the play button, stand there and watch someone. I guess that's why we have so many fireworks and light shows, which I'm not complaining, but yeah, it'd be cool to see how that kind of future would evolve. Awesome. Luca, how about you? Future 5-10 years, what's it going to look like? What's your prediction?
Yeah, is a difficult question, I would say, in first instance, because there are two aspects to consider. On the one hand, there is the perspective of the industrial perspective. On the other hand, there is the academic perspective. So I would like to talk mostly about the academic perspective, because I'm more acquainted to it. Also because, to be honest with you, at present, there are not so many products that are specifically targeting the musical haptics domain. So for that reason, I really think that in the next 5-10 years, there is a lot of space for innovating in this domain, to create something radically new for enhancing musical experiences for performers, for listeners, for audiences of live music. But in concrete, I believe that the research will probably go in the creation of new wearable devices. And also, of course, you need to create the toolkits to develop these wearables at hardware and software level. And probably what will happen is that since the field is so small at present, designers in this domain will appropriate the toolkits of haptic designers for other domains, such as virtual reality. Just this is my gut feeling. Second thing, I predict with my crystal ball that a sector that could be impacted is the one of musical XR. That is the application of musics and at the boundaries of virtual reality or augmented reality and music, right? Because there is a nascent community of both researchers, but also, and most importantly, of musicians that are really using the mean of virtual reality to create new performances and new compositions and so on. And there, if you use the traditional tools of virtual reality, well, you know that the haptics there is really not developed for musical interactions. And I think that there would be a lot of space to create something, some products that musicians would like to use, precisely because digital musical instruments are devoid typically of haptic sensations that are so important to musicians. And finally, I would like to bring, up my idea of the paradigm of the Internet of Musical Things. Is more a wish list than a prediction. I would like to see more research in the domain of interactions between devices, between musical instruments on the one hand and haptic wearables for the audiences on the other hand. That would be great, I think.
Thanks, Luca. Just a comment. I mean, I completely agree with you. The fact that design in some fields will appropriate of design tools for haptics in other fields. I mean, we do design system for haptics, and we are seeing that going on now. So like the fact that there is interest in haptics in many markets, like, gaming, XR, but streaming music. And of course, our product is not targeted for a certain kind of people, and it's being verticalized a little bit for, say, game design. But we are basically re-evaluating a little bit our priorities, because there is this, maybe there is a baseline that makes sense for a ton of people. and will help the designer tell us then how to verticalize that in the specific market. Because at the end of the day, we are at the service of the user, not the other way around. So yeah, I definitely see already ongoing the first one that you're sharing.
Beautiful. Thank you for looking into your crystal ball. I know it's a tough question, but that was a wonderful answer and gives us all a lot to really think about in terms of the future, both from like a musician and like a guest and audience perspective, which is amazing. Two really important sides. We've reached the end, unfortunately, of the recorded part. So thanks to Samantha and Luca for joining us. You guys did an amazing job at jamming with us on the keys and frequencies and give us a glimpse of the future of where this could go. Very cool. Love wearables, team wearables. Let's go. So jumping back, we have our Q&A portion, which will open the floor to the audience. You can ask questions. It's not recorded, so we'll be turning it off. So if you're really missing out, if you're listening now, that kind of last half of the juicy questions. So be sure to join us. We do this every other week. Haptics Club is here, is excited, and wants to invite folks from all industries all around the world to join us as both guests and as audience members. So you can ask these kind of heavy hitting or questions that you just wanted to ask but never had a chance to, or too embarrassed to do it on video or on recording. But to remind everyone, we're at the Haptics Club on Twitter. You can check out our newsletter, sign up there. That way you can know who's coming up next, what we've got going on. And our website is thehapticsclub.com. And be sure to stay on top of all our episodes. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on all the major podcast platforms. And what's coming up next? We have our final episode of the season. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be basically like a recap, a discussion from the Haptics Club team of all the things that have happened, including today's episode. So you definitely don't want to miss it. So be sure to check out the website for that. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. So thanks again, Samantha and Luca, for being here.